In the annals of world history, firearms have been a fairly recent addition to man's arsenal for waging war. In the ancient world, new developments in metallurgy were equivalent to the invention of nuclear armaments today. A foot soldier's main objective was not the mastery of hand and foot fighting, but rather the use of all kinds of swords, spears, and archery. Of all the different Asian fighting arts, Chinese Kung Fu most preserves its medieval heritage and keeps alive the ancient practice of weaponry. Considered obsolete training by many nowadays, these profound skills will be discussed and demonstrated here tonight by two close friends of mine, Manuel Marquez and Tom Sneed. Good to have you guys here.
Thank you.
Both of you have appeared on Kung Fu for Health and Self-Defense before, and tonight we'll join arms and discuss specifically short weapons. For the people that didn't get to see your last shows, maybe we'll get your own personal background. Manuel first.
Okay, well, I started studying Kung Fu from Master Kam Yuen and from Sifu Steve Ball. From there, they taught me the Northern Shaolin and Northern Prairie Mana system and did the 18 classical weapons. And from there, we trained the Qigong and had a couple other things to do with the Kung Fu stuff with Joe. But we've been training for a while, and it's been really fun.
Okay, Tom?
I've been in martial arts about 9 years. I started off with a little bit of Northern Shaolin training for about 1.5 years or so, and then went into the styles of Hsing Yi Chen and Tai Chi Chen, which I study from Dr. Roger West, who's a Torrance-based chiropractor. And about 3 years ago, I then started teaching classes at the school, along with one of my school brothers.
Okay, a lot of the weapons in the Chinese armory looks like something might be right off of Star Trek. You know, there's many different exotic ones, but in reality they all go down to the basics. So Manuel, maybe you could talk a little bit about specifically long weapons.
Well, they first, like a caveman, they had these sticks to ward off the animals. And so you have the sticks and the spear and Kwando, which is we have over here. Some of the basic weapons that we have, and the Tiger Fork, which is at the very end, is one of the advanced weapons that we have. But for those that we have, they're used for different aspects in fighting. For one's for basic training, and the other ones go to farther advanced training. But they go from long stick from 6 foot to a broken up part, which is like a 6 foot and another 3 foot connection to it. So there's a total of about 20-something weapons, or even more, that they have that they use now. But there are still ones that they had in the the Shaolin temples that they don't even use to this day.
As long as there's been movies in Hollywood, people have seen sword fighting, and the Chinese versions are often different than the ideas we have, the way a sword would be used. So Tom, if you could talk a little bit about short weapons.
Okay, well, there's quite a good deal of short weapons. I understand we have a little visual aid here today. Basically, the short weapons involve any weapon that's roughly about 3 to 4 feet and less, okay? So you can see on the chart here that even involves like bow and arrows. It involves the different types of swords and short sticks, little axes, hammers, battle axes. You know, like I say, just about anything that's done mainly for like hand-to-hand combat, whereas a lot of the long weapons, conversely, were used more for techniques on horseback and whatnot.
All right. I might also mention here that there are also flexible weapons, which would be the chain whip and the 3-sectional staff. Also weapons to be thrown. Generally, the Chinese won't want to throw their spear like we see in the movies. They want to hang on to it, you know, because it would save their life only in their hands, right? Okay, I'd also like to find out, people watch the show on the weapons and they would say, well, nowadays people have guns. So what can be the value of learning, keeping these traditions alive? So I'd like to ask Manuel, what are the practicalities involved in learning a short weapon in an emergency situation?
Well, what I feel from being in the streets, from practicing the sword and the short stick and the other weapons that we have for short, okay, you might have, on the streets, you would never use those because you can't carry them around with you, but you pick up a broomstick or a crowbar or a stick that's holding a tree up or something that is like immediate purposes to save your life, those practices from using that strengthens the body, so you can use any kind of weapon that is in a stick form or a metal object. So it can save your life in the long run for even the ideas that you have for just using weapons.
Right. Common, you know, household implements, pencils, keys, magazines, things like this could be right at hand. Coins can be thrown in the face. And There are several things. You'd want to give yourself whatever edge that you would need in the situation. You don't want to cut anything out that might be a possibility.
Well, on top of that, you really don't know at that time when it's going to happen, and whatever's laying around with you, and if you can pick that up and actually save your life with it, your training will pay off, because you'll have the strength and the ability to use it and out-counter, and even to knock the person down and run at least.
Right. And Tom, beyond just the obvious self-defense aspects, what are also the other attributes that weapon training gives the martial arts student?
Well, let's take hand training, for instance. Mainly when a martial artist does an empty hand form, the focus is put on the hands, okay, so that you're trying to learn how to develop and transfer power from the body out into the hands. So by transferring that same idea to the practice of short weapons, you're trying to be able to transfer and extend that power out beyond your hands, as well as you get other benefits with just becoming coordinated by manipulating your weapon. And also, it's just a little bit of extra kind of resistance, or a kind of a little bit of weight training for the arm, just to swing the weapon around. I remember when I was first learning the sword, one of the things that was even more difficult than remembering the moves was just how much my hands and arms ached just getting used to holding the weapon. Yeah.
Right. Weapons like the tiger fork and the kwando, which we showed on the weapon rack earlier, they're like top heavy, one end, and you have to constantly resist having that extra weight on the end. And so it gives that some of the weight training that people would use to build up. That Kung Fu uses the weapons as a form of strength enhancement.
It's like the basic stick that they had with the weight at the end. To lift that up alone would be like equivalent to probably a weightlifter benching 250 or so if they really try to do it from the very end.
Right. And often when you're first learning, they always tell you to pick up the heaviest, crudest, and most awkward object to use as that weapon first to get used to that weight. And then gradually then you work up to the actual weapon itself, and you got complete control of it then. I would also like to ask either one of you really, how far along the way do you believe a beginner student should start weapons training? Maybe Manuel first.
Well, if I'm going to train my students, they're with me usually to almost for a year. So well, it could be 8 months to a year, you know. Some do 3 months, some 6 months, but I figured they have to learn to move their body first before they can get a weapon going swinging around their body. Because I've seen a lot of accidents in schools since I've been in different styles, and some of the accidents have actually made some of the students leave because they've hurt themselves so bad. So it usually can be from 9 months to a year or so.
Right, that would be good advice. Okay, next up we have a live demonstration of some of these weaponry techniques. And by all means, I must stress that we're not condoning violence, how to use knives and sticks and things like this, but rather to show you a glimpse of the past, how these things once were used for warfare, and how, like I say, in an absolute emergency situation, you possibly might have to pick something up to protect yourself or your family as well. So please watch closely and pay attention to safety precautions, and we hope you enjoy. Steve Johnson is demonstrating the most basic of all Chinese weapons, the short stick. As mentioned in the interview, this probably originated all the way back to the prehistoric era, when you pick up any branch or piece of bone to use as a weapon. But within these very movements is many applications for self-defense, as well as ideas that will go further with the sword techniques later. Okay, thank you, Steve. Okay, the weapon I'm going to be demonstrating tonight is the dagger. We wouldn't call this a knife in China mainly because it has 2 edges, so it makes it a dagger. All right, it can be held this way, or it can be held this way. And the idea is normally that he has the reach over me. If we were to both hold our weapons out, full extension, okay, he's touching me, but obviously I'm a long way from him. But look what is close enough, okay? If you cut this area, you can bleed to death very quickly, as well as disable him where he would drop his weapon. Okay, so we start off slow with a couple basic techniques that he might use against me with the dagger. Okay, now I'm going to sacrifice my arm. This might break my arm right here, right? But it would be kind of impractical to really try to constantly block with a dagger. It's too small. He's got too much reach over me. It would take too quick of reactions to do that. So So I'm just going to go ahead and use even both arms and both hands to block this first blow, like that. From there, I'd get this out of the way, opening up this target area here. So I could come in with a punch or a cut, slice downward, like that, across, and then come back. And this obviously would be a very dangerous killing technique right there, only to be used in an emergency. Okay, we'll try that one a little bit faster now. Now the second one, once again, you're noticing we're using the arms, the limbs, also as targets. We're not only necessarily going for the heart. Same thing with the short stick. One of the techniques in our short stick form would be bang, bang on the floor. And they say, well, is this just to make noise? Actually, you're going for the feet, the shins, the knees. You take a leg out from somebody, obviously very difficult for him to continue the fight. So let's say Steve is going to try to get for my legs now with the short stick. Slowly first. Okay, comes down on my head like that. Clear this out of the way. One important thing about short weapons, you always have to be aware of the other hand being used. Ducks me, but then I go for that leg, and he tries his last, up, and like that. Okay, a little bit faster with that one there. Or groin. Okay. Okay, the last one then would be a poking action. Either of these weapons could be used not as a slicing or striking action, but a jabbing action, which would be pretty hard to defend against because it comes in and out, much the same as a boxer's fast jab. So slowly we come in once, hit twice, like that. From here I'm going to change my grip to this size, blade up, go for the arm, try for the neck, he blocks it, right away, kick, and takedown. Could finish up like this. Okay. As Manuel had mentioned in the interview, weaponry is only effective once the student has complete knowledge of his body. Okay, I'm too close. He's got my blade locked up. He may even have it disarmed. It could be knocked. Then what? I've got to use my arms and my legs. The stance is very important. Trying to take the opponent down is also very important. And of course, escape is very important. Just do enough to get out of there, right? I would not want to throw this weapon unless I had more weapons. Some of the Chinese martial artists do train in throwing coins, darts, knives, and things like this. So I only have one. I'm not going to try to throw this weapon, but rather use it in a striking fashion like that. Okay, thank you, Steve. Okay. Now we're going to demonstrate the form, as we explained on so many other episodes of this show. Forms are a catalog of all the different techniques that you would practice when you don't have a training partner. And this is the way they were handed down over the generations. This knowledge was kept together. So this is a basic single dagger form. There is a double dagger form. Maybe on a later episode we'll show that one as well.
Sword and the spear. The spear is a long-range weapon. The thing is to be able to block and maneuver against the guard, the back shield, the sword, and the edge, the cutting knife. Now here we're going to do a couple of basic techniques with the spear. In slow motion, the spear will be coming towards the head. And as it's rolling around, it blocks and rolls around the head to a blocking situation. Meanwhile, I can come in, chop the leg, okay, and then cut across the neck. Okay? Now a faster version. Okay, now another version that we have is the backing motion of the spear and the sword. It's blocking from the very back. As the opponent comes, he comes around and it's coming around over, and it blocks across. so that the stance and the leg is blocked with the spear. As the motion comes in, cutting across and butting to the face, or cutting across. And faster motion. Okay, the other version that we have for this is a blocking motion of coming in close into the body. Okay, they have the motion of a short range spearing to the face. Okay, the person comes, is blocked, it chops maybe to the hand, to the sword, or I mean the spear, and then from there it rotates to the motion of cutting to the head. But meanwhile, you can pull the feet. Okay. Okay, the other one that we have now is another version of a poke. It's an adaptation for when the spear comes to be able to block against the edge and the guard. Okay, that consists of is a double poke. And it's a poke, and it comes back around into another blocking. Okay, you're blocking the spear, so I can grab it, pull it, cut into the neck or the stomach, or and then kick into the opponent. Okay, now we're going to do a technique or the form in itself of the sword itself. Okay, thank you, all Simmons. That's just a part of the form that we have. There are two other forms in our system.
Steve's going to help me with showing you a little bit about how the double-edged sword is used. First, let me just tell you a little bit about how this sword is designed. Mainly, it's sharp on both sides, but the sword is mainly only sharp from about here on up. About the top 1/3 of the blade is the sharp portion of the blade, and generally the portion intended for cutting naturally, and the bottom 2/3 are generally the part of the blade that's used for blocking because the steel is more dull here, and so if it gets hit, it won't have a tendency to chip or crack as the sharpened portion will. Okay, so this is generally known as a little bit more complicated weapon to master just because of the sharpness on both edges, and it's generally used in a little bit more of a surgical fashion where you're trying to more or less cut into certain points rather than to just break through. You won't have like trying to bust through him like this fashion, you know. Instead, it's used a little bit more softly, and you try to kind of find a more exact point to attack. Okay. First off, if Steve just hold the stick out. Okay. If this was a sword or a stick or what have you, any type of a short weapon, and he was trying to stab it at me, it's like I say, a general motion with this wouldn't be to try to block it out of the way and then attack back, but more to kind of just come in with a little bit of a rounded motion and maybe cut here at the wrist and then slice again by turning back here and then come in for an attack this way. Sometimes, like I say, the bottom end would be used for actually blocking the weapon. If he was maybe attacking down to my knee, then I could come across here and block here and then try to come over and slice back this way in that type of fashion. Okay. Another thing that you see a lot in sword forms in Chinese martial arts is usually at the beginning or the end you start with the sword in the opposite hand that you intend to use it with. Okay, so I'm basically a right-handed person and like to use my sword form right-handed. But in the beginning of the form, you'll see I start with the sword in the left hand. Well, these movements can also still be used for technique. If Steve was to chop down and try to hit me, I would try to come in close, get inside of his weapon and catch him at the arm, do a kick and a block here, kind of trapping his arm with the butt end of my weapon. He could step back possibly. I would stick to him, not letting him get out of my reach, make it difficult and stretched out for him here so he's still not in a comfortable position to counterattack. Come through, hit, and then off with his head. Okay? So that's just a little bit more complicated technique that you might have to see with the sword. Okay? Thank you very much, Steve. Okay, the form that I'd like to show is the Yang Tai Chi sword form from my system. Very much.
I want to thank everybody involved. That was an excellent demonstration.
Thank you.
And there's a degree of skill there that goes beyond, just normal empty hand practice like so many other martial arts. And Kung Fu definitely requires an overall awareness of your body and what it can do and the understandings, and as well as the history of the weapons and whatnot. And like I say, philosophy is also a very important part of the martial arts. This is what sets us apart from street fighters or something like this. I'd like to ask Manuel, what type of ideas do you like to impart on your students as far as philosophy goes?
Well, for one, when I'm teaching my students, they have to learn the respect first for themselves and then to their art. And then from there, they blossom to like a little flower, and they start taking things not for advantage, but for the good. And then they help everybody that's around them and their facilities and their school, their teachers, and their family. But it all comes out to things that I would like to see in the arts would be for everybody to be more in unity, to share things, and not to be showing that who's the best of who. Because there's some schools that you go to and they won't even let you in the door because they have too much pride and they think that they don't need to know or learn anything else. But in our school, it's open, and I myself like to learn from other people because my road is so long and the tunnel is so long, and that all I can see is that the white light at the end. So,
right. Perpetually a student in Kung Fu, no matter how long you're involved in the art, even though you may hold your instructor ranking, there is no end to the learning.
No.
And how about you, Tom?
Yeah, I have to agree with that. And also, we try to just impart a desire for our students to learn for their own personal development. Usually the people that want to come in and just learn a couple of quick techniques on how to fight and maybe how to go out and be bad on the street, those are the people that usually don't last in the school anyway, because there's a lot of very difficult and hard training that goes behind being able to do a lot of things that you saw us do today. And so it just takes a little bit of a special person that cares enough about themselves to try to develop more physically and mentally and make themselves a better person. One of my teachers used to say, if your Kung Fu is good, your whole life will be better. And I really believe that.
Yeah. So the viewers may think it's kind of unusual to see people standing around waving swords, but you go into China at 5 a.m., 6 a.m. in all the national parks, and there's people 80, 90 years old, all the way down to little children, and they're doing those Tai Chi swords or their Tai Chi handsets, and this is the way they start their day. This is the way they get their mind set on their work or their school, whatever's about to come about. And I'd like to see more acceptance here in America. Things like this. If you walk down the street with one of these weapons, you're bound to look for trouble from the police or somebody.
Or you get a pair of handcuffs.
Right, well. Okay, weapons do represent more than just violence. Their sharpened edges signify the honed spirit forged through discipline. We have no videotapes or photographs of the ancient world, but we do have the living records of Kung Fu. In the end, it will be the human mind and body itself that will determine ultimate destruction or world peace. I would like to thank, once again, everybody here involved, as well as you viewers, for taking your time to watch this, to learn a little bit about us. And we'd like to learn a little bit more about you. If you feel that you want to know more about something specific, please call us with the phone number at the end of the show. We'll be more than happy to answer any of your questions. I'll refer you to either of the other instructors.
Right, we're here. Right back.
We're here to help. Okay? So please, join us again next time on Kung Fu for Health and Self-Defense.